Hi, I'm Reet Singh, and welcome to the TripOutside podcast. On this show, I interview local guides and outdoor industry experts to uncover the best outdoor travel spots and epic outdoor activities. Before we jump in, I have a quick favor to ask you. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a comment and let us know what you liked or what you'd like to hear next. Our goal is to help answer all of your outdoor adventure travel questions. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you, Darcy Gechter, for joining me today. Darcy is the author of the book Amazon Woman and the first woman to ever kayak the Amazon River from source to sea. Amazon River has been quite possibly debated to be the longest and largest river, and Darcy can go a bit more into that. But I'm super excited to have Darcy on today. We met in Crested Butte during the outdoor recreation conference, and I was lucky enough to hear Darcy give her motivational talk of paddling the river, and we connected there. So I'm super excited to have you on today, Darcy. Where does the podcast find you today?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I am in Glenwood Springs, Colorado right now, just back from a kayaking trip in Colombia and getting caught up on business and life and all that stuff. And I'm very excited to be chatting with you.
And what was the trip like, and how long were you in Colombia just now?
We were only there 3 weeks, and kind of a dual purpose trip, just to go kayaking for fun. And also my business that I run is called Small World Adventures, and our main thing is running whitewater kayaking trips in Ecuador. And we were sort of curious if we might want to also offer trips in Colombia. And I think for now, we're going to stick with Ecuador. Colombia was amazing and the people there were awesome, but it's hard to beat Ecuador in terms of proximity of rivers. Like within an 80-kilometer radius, you have so many different rivers and sections, like 35 different sections, I think, with super minimal travel. And that wasn't always the case in Colombia. So it was a great trip, but maybe not so successful on the business end. But that's
logistics
okay.
Seems maybe harder. Access and logistics.
More driving. And,
Got
like
it.
a lot of our guests, they only have 1 week for vacation. And so, they definitely want to maximize their time spent kayaking versus driving around in a car. And so Ecuador is pretty awesome for that.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you have spent close to 20 years there now. When did you guys start there?
I have been there over 20 years. I think my first year was 2001, and the business has existed. This is actually the 30th anniversary of Small World Adventures. And it was
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. It was started by a guy named Larry Vermeeren in 1993. And Don's been there since 95, and I joined in 2001. And now Don and I own the business together, and we're carrying on the tradition that Larry started.
And if I highly recommend, by the way, anyone that is listening to please pick up the book, Amazon Woman. I will leave a link to it in the show notes. I'm in the middle of it right now. And every morning I wake up, I have my coffee, and I'm so excited to pick up the book and read it. And through that, I'm learning that this business has gone through you've gone through a few changes with the business. I think you sold it at one point, went and did the trip, and then it seems like you've purchased it back. And when was that?
Yes, that is true. In 2012, one of our clients approached us and said that he wanted to change his life, and he was a software engineer. He wanted to get into kayaking a bit more, so he offered to buy the business. And it wasn't actually for sale, but the three of us thought to ourselves, well, if someone actually wants to buy this business, maybe we should be opportunistic and sell it. So, we sold to him in 2012. And a couple things happened. Like, he realized that running a kayaking business isn't necessarily the best way to get to go kayaking a lot. I mean, we do get to kayak a ton, but it is also a business just like any other business. And you have to spend a lot of time doing things other than kayaking. So he kind of realized that. And Don and I particularly realized how much we missed it while we were gone. So yeah, we went off and we did our Amazon source to sea trip, and that was great. And then when we came back from that, we were a little bit at a loss of what we were going to do with ourselves. And so we actually had started a new guiding business in the meantime, and we did a trip to Bhutan and to Kenya. And then we were going to start offering trips in Ecuador again. And we just wanted to give the guy who bought Small World a heads up about that. It had been about 2.5 years at that point since we sold. And during that conversation, he said that he wasn't really into it anymore and he would be happy to sell the business back to us. So Don and I bought it back in 2016, and we've been running it again ever since.
Wow. I'm really happy to hear that, because while I was reading it, I don't want to give the book away. I was little, I wouldn't say disturbed, but I was like, made me unhappy the way it had ended the first time. So I'm really happy to hear how things are going now. So tell me a bit more about Small World Adventures. What type of trips do you offer? Do you have to be for anyone that's interested in kayaking, or is it only kind of extreme advanced paddle kayakers that come visit you, or the services that you offer?
Yeah, so we are probably not the smartest business people in the world, because our target market audience makes up a very, very tiny percentage of all the people on Earth, because our specialty is like class 4 and 4+ whitewater kayaking. So most people are quite experienced to come on our trips, but we do offer, let me just start, I guess, by saying you do not have to have any experience if you want to come. Small World Adventures does offer a couple of like total beginner trips throughout the course of our season. And our season in Ecuador is the North American winter months. So we're there basically November 1 until March 1. And yeah, the majority of our trips are the more advanced, the class 4 and 4+, but we do normally offer 1 to 2 beginner trips. And Ecuador is a great place to learn to kayak because the air is warm and the water's warm. So as you're going through that learning process, you don't have to worry about being freezing cold like you often do here in North America.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, so I guess the simple answer to your question is we specialize in advanced kayaking, but we also do offer everything from total beginners all the way through the process.
Got it. I would say you're a very smart business owner, because if you try to sell to everyone, you sell to no one. That's what I keep hearing, and I agree with. So I love what you guys are doing.
We definitely know our audience. I can say that.
Yeah. So talking about whitewater kayaking, I'd love to understand how you got into it and why you started loving it versus maybe other outdoor recreation things that you did, and what you still continue to find in whitewater kayaking that keeps drawing you back to it.
Okay. Yeah, my introduction to kayaking was extremely accidental. And basically what happened was I graduated high school and I was out looking for a summer job. And I knew that I wanted to be outdoors because I loved, as a kid, I loved playing outside. And, I wasn't really into specific outdoor sports. I would say I was very into school sports as a kid. And the outdoor sports for me, it was more like playing, just climbing around on rocks, playing in the river. But so I just knew that I wanted some outdoor job. And the only thing that I could think of, because I wasn't being very creative, was to be a landscaper. So I was out handing my resume to landscaping companies. And I ran into my middle school track coach, a guy named Brad Ellington, and he said, "Don't be a landscaper, come be a raft guide," which was also his summer job. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, that sounds like a lot more fun than landscaping. So I went and went to the hiring clinic for a rafting company called Colorado Riff Raft. And they gave me a job. And so I spent the whole summer raft guiding, and all the other guides. So I was 18 at that point. All the other guides were in their mid-20s. And I really looked up to them and thought they were the coolest people in the world. And they all went kayaking after work. So I just thought to myself, well, if I want to hang out with these cool people, I better start kayaking. And so towards the end of that summer, I started going with them, and they were willing to let me go. They would take me to the local class 3 run, but they weren't like super interested in teaching me much about it. So I would just try to follow them, and I didn't know how to roll or really have any kayaking skills. So I found it to be very frustrating. And it was also kind of the first sport that I had tried to learn as an adult. My dad taught me how to ski when I was 2 years old. And so I couldn't remember any of the learning process. Like, I just was a good skier and I couldn't remember any of the rest. So kayaking was so frustrating, and I found it to be extremely difficult. And I honestly can say that I didn't like it very much in the beginning. And I guess where it all started to change for me was two things. After about a year, I went to a swimming pool and basically taught myself how to roll, but I spent so much time in that pool over a course of a week that by the end I could roll on both sides. I could roll without a paddle, and I really felt good with that skill. And that was a real game changer on the river, because now I wasn't afraid to try different things. I could try surfing my kayak. I could try to run harder rapids. And before I knew how to roll, every time I would tip over, I would have to get out of my kayak, swim to shore, haul everything out, dump it out. And it was this huge, sort of tiring, embarrassing process. And it wasn't very much fun. But once I learned how to roll, so I could flip over then and roll back up, and it wasn't any big deal. So that helped my progression quite a lot. And the thing that really made me fall in love with kayaking was right around the same time when I was figuring out how to roll. A college friend, so I had been in college 1 year by that point, invited me to skip fall semester and go kayaking in Nepal. And I had never left North America before. So just the travel was really exciting and a big adventure for me at that point. But when we got over there, we saw a lot of tourists doing all the normal tourist things, and we did a lot of that as well. But then we went to these very remote rivers, and we didn't see any other tourists, and we got to have what felt like to me a very different kind of interaction with the local people, because you weren't at the temple where, millions of people visited every year. For a lot of these people, I think we were some of the first foreigners they had seen, and they were very curious about us. We were very curious about them. And so that style of traveling with a kayak and expedition kayaking is what really set the hook for me. And that's kind of what I have spent. I guess I've been kayaking 25 years now, and most of the focus has been on that style of kayaking.
Got it. More find new places, see if things are doable, runnable, taking on challenges in remote places that not everybody's doing.
Yeah, exactly. I really enjoy sort of getting as far off the beaten path as I can, and finding new ways to challenge myself and see new places. That's kind of the biggest appeal to me.
I'm really really curious to understand your mindset about, you take on these really, really difficult challenges, and you probably don't, they're difficult, but it's just the thing maybe for you. And I'm trying to understand the mindset of seeing big challenges, and how do you work your way? What's your process of taking these on? And when obstacles arise, do you have certain things that you fall back on, mantras, tactics that you use to overcome those obstacles to achieve the goals that you have? And I know that's a loaded question, but if you can share any tips of what works for you, I would love to understand more about your headspace and processes around that.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'm blessed with sort of a weird disconnect in my mental processes. Like I love thinking up, what is going to be the next expedition, what's going to be the next challenging river. And I know in my brain that they're going to be hard, but I think there's just something in my brain function that blocks a true understanding of what the real challenges are going to be like. So when I'm sitting in the library, for example, planning the next river, I'm able to sort of ignore all the true suffering that's going to be entailed when we go out there. So I'm really excited about planning it. I can move forward. There's like nothing in my brain that's going to slow me down in the planning process. Because if I really stop to think about everything, I think it would be easy to say, maybe I'll just stay at home. That will be more pleasant, more comfortable, easier. But I'm pretty good at, there's just like this dead space in my thinking process that ignores all that. And I think that's honestly really helpful for keeping me motivated, planning, being excited to get out there. And then once I get to the place and all these realities come up, at that point I have this feeling of like, well, I'm here now, I just have to deal with it. And it's so, I won't say that it's easy, but it's easy to force myself to deal with it, because I'm at that point, I feel like, okay, there's no other options but to just deal with this. And in terms of like a mantra or a way of working through the suffering, there's two in my mind very distinct attitudes when things are going wrong. And one is really defeatist. And I mean, we've all had this experience of the feeling of, why is all this bad stuff happening to me? Why can't it just be easy? Why do these problems keep arising? And when you get into that, like the why me sort of attitude, it's easy to feel desperate and super bummed out and unmotivated to overcome challenges. And then the other mindset is like going into these trips, just knowing that a lot of stuff is going to go wrong. And no matter how well you plan any expedition or anything in your life, I think very rarely do things go totally according to plan. You can hope that it mostly sticks to the plan, but just the reality is that problems always come up, things always deviate from the plan. And if you go in with a real acceptance that that's going to be the way it is, I think you can have this mindset of like, okay, bring on the problems. I'm ready to start overcoming these things. And a few years ago, I read a book called The Obstacle is the Way, and it's sort of about a stoic philosophy of life.
I love that book.
Yeah, it's a great book. And there's certain things about it that I like and I disliked, but that just the title, the obstacle is the way, that comes to my mind all the time in the middle of expeditions. And it's like, okay, that's right. We have a problem. We just need to dive headfirst into it and come out the other side. And that, just thinking of that really does sort of help boost my morale when I feel myself sliding into that why me mentality.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. I think the first thing that you said, that you don't try to maybe overthink the challenges and you're just while you're in the planning process, I feel like I do that a lot. And I think some of that overthinking up front creates this resistance. And I think that resistance is worse than the actual pain itself that you might or might not encounter in the future. But thinking about it, you can, yeah.
Sorry, you go ahead.
No. I feel like thinking about that pain creates even more pain and suffering than the actual, like, when you're in it, just embracing it, seeing it, and, working your way through it is not, I wouldn't say not as difficult, but we end up making the problem or the emotional pain much bigger, emotional challenge, maybe the obstacle, much bigger by overthinking in advance. I feel I do that in my personal life, and I'm trying to tap into that. Is like, how do I just, when I encounter the problem, engage with it then and say, okay, this is what it is. And in that moment, try to, figure out, okay, I'm going uphill, and this for mountain biking for me is like, I'm going uphill and this hill is really challenging. But if I'm sitting there thinking about how challenging it is, or thinking about, oh my God, why am I doing this? And why am I out here? I think that chatter creates more pain and suffering than the actual pain that I'm feeling in my legs or my lungs.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I feel like so many people sort of stymie their own plans with too much over worrying. And it's easy to not allow yourself to start something once you start thinking about all the potential problems that could come up. And so, yeah, I think it is sort of an interesting balance between, thinking through potential problems so that you can be prepared on your expedition. That is definitely important, but not getting so bogged down in the anticipation of those problems that you decide not to go at all. And, we've all heard people say, like, plenty of day trips or long expeditions, whatever it is, you've set out and you failed. But I don't think very many people regret that. Like, at least you tried, and then you can learn from whatever went wrong while you failed. But then how many other trips have been just never begun because people were worrying about all the problems? And I know that people do regret that later. Oh, I wish I would have tried this. I wish I would have tried that. And to me, it's just yeah, you just have to dive in and see what happens, in a sense. And if you're prepared to meet the challenges when you get out there, awesome. If you're not, you can shut it down for now, learn what you need to learn for next time, and try again.
Yeah, it's almost like you could have a plan to fail if you want, and just say, okay, this is my plan B. If I go into it and it's not working out, I'm going to get out, but at least try it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I would be, I want to make sure that, I mean, the hardest challenge I had for interviewing you is which topic to talk about. You have so many incredible stories. You're plant-based, you're vegan, your message about how you grew up in not always given equal opportunity, and thinking about your volleyball career and how people were perceiving you differently. I want to talk about a little bit how the Amazon trip kind of came about, first of all,
Okay.
and what your personal motivation was to join Midge on the trip. And if you can expand a bit more about your personal motivation, how the trip came about. And then I know there's a lot about your belief system, and believing what you could do and could not do based on other people's stigmas or shoulds and labels being placed on you. And after the trip, how that maybe changed for you.
Okay. This might be a long answer, so feel free to interrupt at any point if
Take
I
your
start
time.
rambling. So the Amazon trip came about in sort of an unlikely way. It was all thought up by a guy named David Midgley, whose nickname is Midge, and that's how I write about him in the book. And he is a very brilliant computer programmer from London who essentially was having a little bit of a midlife crisis, and he was worried that he was going to, quote, waste his entire life sitting behind a computer writing code. So he decided that if he could take one big adventure, that he would feel his life was well-rounded at that point, and he could, die a happy man. So he started looking into adventures, and he decided that Everest, in his mind, had been overdone, as had sailing around the world. And while he was searching for his perfect adventure, he came across a statistic that said more people had walked on the moon than had descended the Amazon River from source to sea. And everyone who had gone down the Amazon from source to sea had either hiked around the whitewater or done it in a raft, or only certain sections of it. So he found out that nobody had kayaked from source to sea on the Amazon, and he decided that he would be the first guy to do it. And so that was all well and good, except that Midge had never been kayaking, he had never been camping, and he truly had no outdoor experience, no athletic background. He was so obviously very ill prepared for such a journey. And so he started coming to Ecuador to train with us, Small World Adventures. And he basically knocked on our door and said, hey, you guys need to turn me into a class 5 kayaker, basically an expert kayaker, so that I can survive the whitewater in the Amazon headwaters. And so Don and I trained him for 10 years. And he really did spend a decade not only learning to kayak and becoming a good kayaker, but also just working on his general fitness. He took jungle survival courses. He kind of everything he did in his free time for a decade was really focused on this Amazon goal. And I think I'll get back to my story in a minute, but I think the really cool part of Midge's story is that he transformed himself from this unathletic computer programmer into a guy who could kayak the entire Amazon. And the whitewater in there, we were on the Montaro River when we were in the whitewater sections. And it's truly one of the hardest rivers on earth. And he successfully kayaked it. And it obviously wasn't easy for him. It took him a decade of training. But I always have the feeling it's like, wow, if Midge was able to accomplish that, then us humans truly are capable of pretty amazing things if we're willing to work hard enough for it. And so that's kind of a cool part of Midge's story.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I love that you seek inspiration in him sometimes, in his ability to keep coming back year after year and persist. And, there was a story about how I think Don ended up rescuing Midge and one other person in this class 4 whitewater when he was maybe a little bit overconfident and almost died, right? I think you could almost safe to say that, but it didn't rattle him. He kept coming back. He kept trying and kept at it. And I think there's a lot to that, because setting a 10-year away goal and sticking to it takes a lot. And I see that you found inspiration in that by different lifestyle choices that you've made recently. And I really love that we all learn from each other. It's not just, we're all making really tough life decisions, whether it's in the outdoors or in our personal habits sometimes. And we can lean on each other for the different things for willpower. So that was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And so after his decade of training, Midge invited Don and I to go with him on the trip. And so that's how I got involved with it. And my personal reasons for wanting to go, just to go back to a little bit of the background that you were talking about, I'm a woman and I'm quite short and quite skinny, and I do not exude like the visual image of strength or adventure or explorer or any of these kind of things. Like, definitely, I know when people look at me, they sort of write me off as a wimpy looking little woman, basically. And it's kind of been that way my entire life. And we were talking earlier about how, like, we all make these snap judgments. It's not, I'm not necessarily criticizing the people who are judging me, because I look at other people and I judge them too. And our brains, they just want to be able to put everyone in categories. It makes it easier for us to organize all of the visual information coming in. But to me, the problem comes when, like, I wanted to be a volleyball player in high school. I want to be a kayaker now. And so much of the feedback from society is like, no, you can't do these things. You're too short. You're not strong enough. Women can't run hard whitewater. You kind of are constantly bombarded with these messages from society about who should be doing what and who shouldn't be doing what. And so my motivation for kayaking the Amazon, my motivation for writing the book, is partially because I really enjoy personal challenges. It's a great feeling to tackle something really hard and have to work at it and persevere and eventually succeed in completing it. I love that feeling. But I also wanted to share my story with other people who are facing sort of similar judgments from the outside world, I guess. And I do think it's very easy to succumb to that, to do what society wants us to do. But if we feel strongly enough and are passionate enough that we want to go against that grain, I think it's really important to do that, to defy those expectations, to break down the barriers. And I'm actually a really shy person. I much prefer to fly under the radar and not be noticed by anybody. But the older I've gotten, the more I've realized it's important to try to do these things in a more public way in order to show other people what is possible, what they can aim for, that they're not alone in feeling judged or pigeonholed or not supported by society, I guess. And so all of these reasons are reasons why I went down the Amazon, wrote the book, while I why I still like to seek out kayaking challenges and just try to share my story, in venues like this. And I really hate social media, but I try to do it sometimes, and just to get the word out there that defying expectations is cool, even though it's hard.
Yeah. Oh my God. There's so much incredible advice there. And I agree with you. I shy away from social media because I feel like social media, the platform, technology itself is to blame for a lot of problems in society. But then the positive side of it is like when you are doing something that you want to get the message out because it can hopefully have an impact on even on a few people, you want to contribute and get the word out. And I love that you're putting yourself out there, you're doing the talks, you're uh, really sharing this really positive message by actually putting yourself through the hard things. And I find that if sometimes to encourage, someone else to try to do hard things, I also need to continue to push my own limits, whatever they might be. And I think those limits are different for everyone. For someone
Yeah,
recovering
absolutely.
from an injury or sickness and maybe just getting out of bed and like standing up to brush their teeth long enough, that's very difficult depending on where you are. Um, but I try to have empathy and think about, who else is doing hard things out there. And if I am to inspire anyone, I can go out there and do hard things. So I think it definitely works. Reading your story inspires me. So I can tell you 100% that it works.
Well, awesome to
And
hear that.
yeah, and the same on my end, I guess for the guy typical stereotype is like, big muscles, huge. And I used to live that life. I was kind of into bodybuilding and powerlifting and wanted to be as big as possible because I thought that was a sign of strength, maybe. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process of like powerlifting. I think that's a cool sport in its own. But eventually I realized that I was taking so many supplements and um, ruining the inside of my body, and my cholesterol levels were super high. I was eating so many eggs
Oh,
and
wow.
meat and practically peanut protein. So I turned vegetarian first and eventually vegan. And now I'm 150 pounds instead of 185 pounds at, 5'9". And I feel so much better. I feel so much stronger and I'm able to do so many
Oh,
different
nice.
things. But the definitely believe that like, and people probably see me as small or not as strong, but I love that you're taking on those big challenges. And one of the stats in the book that really got me was you weigh 120 pounds, and there was a kayaking trip they took in California where you hiked up 13 miles with an 85-pound kayak and gear with you. So that was 70% of your body weight that you hiked up
Yes.
with. So I love that small can be strong, and like strong is strong. It doesn't matter, what you look like. And I think that's what I really want to get the message out on is focus on being whatever that means for you, but like tapping into your full ability and our physical capability, mental capability. I think we're capable of so much more than we think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you earlier made a really important distinction. Many people have pointed out to me that kayaking the Amazon is a very unrelatable activity. And I get that. And you mentioned earlier, like, personal challenges are just that. They're very personal. And for some people that are struggling with different kinds of illnesses, it truly might be, getting out of bed or a walk around the block or making it to work that day. And it's really important to not try to measure up or compare your own challenges with my challenges or your neighbor's challenges, anybody else's. Just focus on your own challenge. Find something that's hard for you, whatever that is, and go out and face it and draw inspiration off anyone else who's doing something hard in their lives. But I think that your point there just really made me remember that challenges are a very personal thing, and we can't be looking at others. We can look to others for inspirations, but we shouldn't look at exactly what they're doing to compare to our own daily challenges.
Yeah, thank you. So you go down the trip. It was not, speaking of challenges, definitely, I think you made it sound so much easier. And maybe it was because from your point of view, you're just like doing thing after thing after thing every day. Could you summarize the overall trip, how long it was, how long if it was whitewater and flat water, and how long it took, and some of the challenges that you and the team had to go through. I know you've said this many times. I really encourage everyone to pick up the book, but I would love to get a summary of your overall trip and the challenges that you had to overcome, and how long it took.
Yeah, so the whole trip took 148 days. And of that, it was 25 days of whitewater, and the rest was flat water. And yeah, I mean, I am definitely not great at giving a dramatic reenactment of the trip. You know, my personality is just to sort of downplay everything and just say, oh yeah, it was kind of hard at times. But I did try really hard in the book to give an accurate accounting of some of those challenges. And I'll just go over a couple of them right now. One of which they are building a new dam in the whitewater section. And what that looked like while we were there was they hadn't actually started building the dam yet, but they were building a road down to the river. And it was sort of sheer walled cliffs on either side, about 2,000 feet tall. So they were using dynamite to blast in a road to get access to the river. And we did negotiate with the project manager. Like, that's another thing about this trip. The logistical challenges were so immense. And I think a lot of people don't think about those sorts of things when you have these big expeditions. The physical challenges are obviously quite important, but the logistics are kind of mind-blowing. And one of our logistical things was to find this company, find the project manager, and then negotiate with him to stop their dynamite work while we paddled through this canyon. And we did do that. We got them to stop their work, but they had already progressed enough that the whole river bottom was extremely unnatural, and they had dynamited like house and even apartment building size rocks off the cliffs that were just laying in the river. And so in some places the river was going underneath the rocks, and there would be no way that you could kayak down the rapids and still be alive. So we had to do some portaging, some rope work, and we had negotiated 3 hours worth of them stopping their dynamite work. And I think it took us 6 hours to get through this area. And I'll leave the main part of the stories for the book, so you should definitely go pick that up. But that was, you know, a day of terror, basically trying to survive through this whitewater canyon. And some of the other things, we were taking doxycycline as a malarial preventative, which was good for that, but it gives you a heightened sensitivity to the sun. And because of that, our fingernails sort of started getting irradiated from the sun. They had this heightened sensitivity because of the drugs, and then they were sort of facing down all day long, and the UV light was reflecting off the water and hitting our fingernails. And so they started to like detach, so basically die and detach from our fingers, which was sort of excruciatingly painful. So every time you would try to get dressed or touch anything, if you just like caught a fingernail a little bit, it was pretty intense pain. I mean, kind of oddly intense considering it was coming from your fingernails. But so we had just some physical problems like that. And then we had a lot of mental obstacles, I guess. You know, spending 148 days with the same 3 people is very challenging. And then you throw in a lot of adverse conditions and hard times. And we definitely struggled quite often to keep working as a team and to not sort of turn on each other and fight, which we did plenty of that. But we did succeed in finishing the expedition together, which is not altogether a common thing with big, long expeditions like this. And so, yeah, I mean, the whole trip on very much physical, mental, and emotional levels was constantly trying to figure out how to deal with these problems, trying to figure out how to keep the motivation to keep going in the face of all these problems. And we all just sort of narrowed our worldview down to the Amazon River. And we sort of all made a pact not to think about outside things, not to talk about the food that we wished we were eating, but really just to confine our outlook to the Amazon. And when you sort of ignore the rest of the world and realize that nothing else mattered right now besides just paddling downstream, it made the task a little bit easier, or a little bit easier to focus on, I guess.
Yeah, I could
And
see
I think
that.
I got distracted there, but I'll stop talking now.
No. There's the finger. If anyone has jammed their fingernail in a door or other places, we know how painful finger pain is, which you explained. I can only. I don't want to imagine, and I'm not going to. But
Yeah, I guess there's a reason that in the movies, when they're torturing people, they're ripping
yeah,
off their fingernails with pliers.
right, exactly. That's the first visual I got to. And I think your message about there's all the different challenges, the physical, the mental, and teamwork. I think people is such a hard thing, because I feel like your next book should be about teamwork, by the way. Or after you write about veganism and all these other things. I it's like the number of decisions you have to make with a person, or the number of opportunities to get into conflict and work through, not necessarily conflict, but differing opinions, and having to do that not just over the 148 days, but before, during the planning. I can't imagine how much you guys had to figure out how to work together. And that's actually a really, really great story, that very different personalities and reasons of why everybody's out here and doing this. And the fact that you guys pulled that part off and finished together is remarkable.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we felt pretty good about that.
I read that you only ate a breakfast and dinner, where there were only 2 meals, or 148 days of getting up and paddling every single day. And it may have been different on certain days, right? But on top of that, you are vegan, and I am as well. And I get the question all the time about, how do you get your protein, and how do you get? Aren't you worried about some vitamins and strength and all these different things? And I would love to get your opinion about how veganism has had an impact in your outdoor recreation or kayaking, in terms of, do you feel like it gives you a competitive advantage, and maybe what your reasons were for going plant-based?
Okay. Yeah, my reasons, it started off 100% because of animal rights reasons, because I don't like the way that we treat animals in our food system, basically. And so, yeah, 100% of my motivation for going vegan was because I didn't want to be a part of that system. And, since I've learned more about it, I also now understand the environmental advantages of being vegan, and definitely the health advantages. But still, I guess for me, it comes back to the treatment of animals and not wanting to support that system. I started being a vegan right around the time that I started kayaking. So it's hard for me to say,
Around
oh,
18.
I
Yeah.
felt so much better or stronger, because I was doing a whole new sport and having a whole new diet as well. But I don't, like your relaying of my story about carrying the 85-pound kayak up and over Bishop Pass, 13 miles to go kayaking. Like I don't feel a lack of strength. And I do think that I sort of pound for pound, or proportionally, that I am quite strong. And so I feel good about the diet. I don't ever have these feelings of like, oh, if I only ate meat, I would be so much stronger. Like that kind of stuff doesn't cross my mind. And the big thing, the protein thing, I think is sort of funny, because it's so ingrained in us to associate protein with meat, but people don't realize how much protein that beans and nuts and even vegetables have in them. And I think where a lot of people get in trouble is they say, I'm going to be vegetarian, or I'm going to be vegan, and they just take their diet but cut out all meat products without adding in anything else. So maybe they, instead of going out for a burger and fries, they just end up eating French fries. And so they do end up with a very kind of unhealthy and unbalanced diet, trying to do it that way. But I think if people pay a little bit of attention to, now it's so easy. You can Google recipes online and find all kinds of things, but nice mixtures of rice and lentils, rice and beans, vegetable stir fries, tofu. I think it's quite easy to get like a nutritionally balanced vegan diet. Having said that, it wasn't super easy on the Amazon because the food resources were quite limited there. And what was most readily available, like for Don and Midge, was fish. And I couldn't eat that. And so I did have to be more careful on the Amazon. And I know there were certain times when I wasn't getting a very nutritionally balanced diet. Like for days I would eat just rice or something like that until we were able to find a town that had beans or had vegetables. And I guess for me, I'm just willing to put up with that additional suffering because I feel so strongly about being vegan. It's almost like a religion for me. I can't think past it.
You can't not do it. Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Well, you're taking on the suffering so the animals don't have to. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Well, I am so grateful for your time today. I wanted to ask you for one last kind of parting advice. If you had to talk to maybe your 8-year-old self or other younger girls or anyone that might be feeling pressures from the outside about creating their identity and maybe not believing in themselves that they can possibly achieve as much as they wanted to, or think these really big goals are unachievable for them. Any advice that you would leave us with, or leave your past self or the future generation to inspire them to take on tough challenges?
Yeah, I know when I was younger, I drew a lot of my motivation from anger. I would be really mad when people told me that I couldn't do something, and I would be determined to prove them wrong. And I think in some ways that served me well. It was a motivating factor. It did fire me up, but I think that starting from a place of anger isn't necessarily the best place to start from. But it's hard not to feel that way when people are telling you can't do what you want to do or what you believe you can do. And so what I would tell people, or my younger self, is, it's okay to feel angry. Like, it definitely, you shouldn't fight your feelings. It is okay to feel angry, to get fired up, to do things. But then what really helped me is when I realized, like, okay, other people are watching me and being inspired by what I do. So I'm not only doing this for me, but I'm doing it for them. Something about it just felt so much better. And it was a starting point, again, not necessarily from anger at that point, but from like, okay, cool, my actions can help somebody else. So all of a sudden was this shift from just me being angry to me serving a larger community. And I just love that feeling. And I think if, little girls or any person who's being told they can't do something, like, hey, I still need to go out and try this to show other little girls that this is possible. And it's just a great feeling. And I think everyone should at least try.
That is so well said. It's so much easier to think that my actions don't matter, but what you're, I think, coming to is by changing yourself and doing, you're able to doing hard things or overcoming challenges, you're able to inspire others more than you think, and it has a much greater impact. So that's a great way to look at it, and thank you so much for sharing that. Is there anything that we didn't cover today, Darcy? And I would also like to let our users know where they can find you, if they can buy the book directly from you, or where you'd like to point us to all your social channels, your websites, and different places.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can have this written down on your podcast, because my name is really hard to spell, but darcygechter.com is my website. And from that point, yeah, people can order the book there. They can find my social media channels there, which are also at Darcy Gechter. And yeah, I'd love if people follow along. And my new slogan for kind of creating a business around Amazon Woman and this idea of inspiring other people to break the norms, but the new slogan is Defy Expectations. And I just want people to keep that in mind. If people expect me to not be able to do things like kayaking, and I need to defy those expectations, do what I want to do. And we just need to rearrange the whole, I guess, society's perceptions of what certain people can and can't do.
Thank you. I will make sure that every link that we talked about is in the show notes and easy to get to. And thank you, Darcy, for joining me today. It was so amazing to catch up with you again. And I hope to see you on the water sometime next.
Yeah. Thanks so much
please
for
say hi to
having me.
Dawn. And thanks again for your time.
All right. Thank you. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Trip Outside podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, let us know in the comments on Apple Podcasts. Share it with your friends and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, if you felt inspired to travel, you can support the show by booking your next trip on TripOutside.com, the easiest way to book human-powered outdoor adventures.